We're going to talk today about Bryson's wrist angle, something that's kind of really ignored, to be fair.
Oh, his wrist angles are really interesting.
Bryson's wrist angles are so unique, they're just not talked about. He does something very unique in trying to match his address to his address to his impact position, which we're going to talk about and discuss. Before we do, let's just do a little bit of housekeeping. So I've got my hack motion sensor on, which is going to measure what Bryson was doing. So I've gone really weak grip, lead hand and lead arm feeling straighter. So I'm less this way, I feel almost more up through my palm. I can totally see why Bryson wants fit grips, like it totally makes sense why he wants them. So we're seeing big rotations from here to here. So from this parallel to this parallel is where we see Bryson doing amazing more rotations than, say, I would do and other tour players are doing. And it's built all around the matchups, what we can learn from him. I think there's so much you can learn from him about doing it your way or a way that works with you and your coach. You know, it has to kind of bleed together. So I'm going to try and give it a Bryson swing. So I'm not expecting much speed from here. It does feel restrictive. It's quite the opposite, I think, in my head, to the way I would work it out, to the way he is working it out. It's almost like he's presetting that impact position is what he says, which I can work out from this grip. This feels insane. So I've managed to hit it relatively straight, poor strike, but I've got the face pretty much controlled. And now I'm just going to capture one for compare as well, where I feel like I'm going to hit one more with my hold. So the way I've kind of worked it out. This is definitely feeling more natural to me. Amazing, isn't it? I mean, I'm starting in 3 degrees flexion. He's 13. Like 3 degrees to me felt like loads. It's something I would be able to reproduce if I, had another go. But then what happens as well is I'm now going like higher rates of rotation here to manage that. And if I was 13 degrees in flexion at address with this lead hand, I would definitely have to rotate more. And what's interesting as well with my shot is how much I'm having to rotate compared to not as much, and certainly the other way round with my regular shot. Like my regular shot, I'm going less rotation on the way through. When I've got the weaker grip, I'm more rotated on the way through. So basically this angle is managing what he puts in at the start. It's an amazing matchup, and one that you just won't see from most good players. They're just not going to match up that way. Most are going to start in extension. Most are going to have a level of rotation, but certainly not loads in effect, because if they do, they won't be able to manage the face with their face angles in relationship to their wrist and their wrist angles, as we'll go on to. That matchup just wouldn't work. Is one better than another? Well, defining what's better would be the answer, and that answer is getting the ball in there in as few shots as possible. Matchups, this is a great example of a good player doing it in a different way, but a way that matches up. Buckets. So let's talk about wrist angles this way and this way. It's amazing. He's starting with his wrist bent this way, so in flexion. He then extends on the way back and then goes back into flexion on the way down. Where I, and most of the world's better golfers, would start extended, maintain or take a bit of that extension out, then move into flexion with a possibility of going into a bit of extension in impact to stay in flexion. So what he's doing, which is quite unique, is he wants to hit the ball with his wrist in this position. So what he's saying is, I'm going to start in that position. And this is where the matchups get really, really interesting. He's matching up to his impact position. So he's thinking, right, I'm going to be higher hands and here at impact. So why don't I start there and just feel like there's less variables? I mean, it's not actually happening, is it? If you think about it, he's in flexion, then he's extended and having to go back in. So he is having to do a range of movement. But what has made him feel secure is he likes to start more in a position he feels like he's going to hit the ball in. I mean, for me, it just feels so weak in that position. I would rather start in a position where I feel like I can put some forces through the shaft, so I have an extended grip and I've got more ulnar deviation at the beginning. So he's up, kind of lining it all up. I'm actually bending my lead wrist down to the ground more, and what I feel more comfortable with is flattening off and then coming in flatter. That's what, for me, feels like I can put the energy through the shaft to get something out onto the ball, while at the same time controlling the face to path. But for him, I mean, his matchups have worked out completely different, and in a way that would, you know, how many lessons would come to you like this and you wouldn't think about changing them? I mean, obviously, if they're controlling the ball, you would study it and enjoy it, but how many average golfers could handle that position? I'm not actually sure. It's amazing. They are, I mean, he's starting like this. Let's call it bowed, flexion. Top of his backswing, he's extended and then going back into flexion. I mean, I don't know anyone who plays like that or has played like that. And it's certainly something amateur golfers aren't trying. It's something I've never taught golfers. There's so much testing that we can do in this game. This game's got so much development still to have. You know, I'm not saying this is better or worse, but if you don't test this with enough people, you'll never know. What it is amazing. Most people extended, take a bit of extension out, keep it out, then start passing back into it. No one's here to extend it and then back here. It's an amazing matchup. What about his lag then? Lag, he hits it miles, he must get loads of lag, and he lags it, whoa, lag it up. And then the last bit's in the old lag idea, so what we would call ulnar and radial deviation on the way down. He's actually very, very ulnar based with a little bit of radial deviation and taking it out quite early, which is quite interesting considering he's someone that's so connected with hitting the ball miles, where lag for so many years has been taught about as this kind of key to hitting the ball as far as you can. Now you do need obviously some amounts of angles put in to create your most speed, and lots of amateurs do get these angles wrong, but thinking of it on this 2D screen as a kind of lag back or not angle, I think Bryson's great at showing it's not actually the case. I mean, he's very much kind of this way to going here. He has a little increase of that angle before taking it out quite early. He isn't someone who's giving it a massive kind of famous pull in and then release, which has been so overly taught and kind of, I mean, I've seen it punish so many golfers. The more average golfers do these kind of ideas, the more the face is just pointing over there and they cannot control it. He's a great example of someone trying to actually get the angles out quite early. What he is doing though is really relying on this one, isn't he, that we saw at the start. This one is his kind of key, massive factor for him. It's an amazing lesson, isn't it? His movements in his wrist are so unique to him. And that's the beauty. Even if you look at a neutral grip, the balance of forearms, wrists, movements, rotations with every other moving part will be maybe not equally as interesting, but they will be. There'll be matchups. There'll be things in there that make other things work. Things that you might look at on a video screen and say, well, that isn't correct. And that's what hopefully I want you to take from today's video. Bryson, obviously, through his many reasons of what he says, and then certainly the distance gains that are being talked about, I think we forget a lot about some of the bigger lessons that are in there for golfers of all abilities and speeds, of how your matchups will be as unique to you as they will be to Bryson. And then in turn, then the danger of watching generic tip-based videos and thinking that that's something that you will just apply. I always think, I mean, one-to-one lessons, nothing ever is really going to be as good There's that one-to-one connection, that personalised connection to your faults. And I think Bryson, more than any golfer, shows it just dramatically in the way he holds so ridiculously weak. Like, it's unbelievably weak and what would be classed as wrong, and then just simply puts another massive movement in there to compensate for it, to balance it, to match it up. Let me know in the comments down below if this makes sense. Also down there, if you're not subscribed to the channel already, consider subscribing. It's free and you won't miss out on the next exciting fun golf video I post every week. Also, hit that thumbs up button down there if you like the video as well. Let me know which ones you like more of so I can help you and make sure you're getting the content that you think is helping you play better golf. Thanks for watching.